Senator Chris Murphy just asked Secretary of State Marco Rubio a question that millions of Americans are asking. How did we get here? And he would not let Rubio dodge. Murphy started with the war. The administration's decision to blockade Iran has held the entire world economy hostage. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. Until there is an agreement, it stays closed. There is a devastating cost to the U.S. economy. Gas prices are through the roof. Families are struggling. The president said yesterday he is bored by the negotiations. He does not care whether a deal is made. Murphy asked Rubio to explain the bottom lines. What commitments does Iran need to make for the blockade to be lifted? Every day, the administration sends wildly different signals.
What is going to get the strait reopened? Because this is kind of the only question that matters for American consumers right now. And every day we get wildly different signals from the president as to whether he even is engaged in this question as to whether the strait is going to reopen.
Rubio said the blockade exists because Iran closed the straits. They are firing on commercial ships. They have mined international waters. The blockade is only against Iranian ships. The first condition is that Iran must reopen the straits. Ships must be able to sail without being fired upon, without paying a toll. Then, Phase 2. Iran must commit to negotiations on the disposition of highly enriched uranium. They must agree to severe limitations on enrichment activity.
Phase 2 is they have to commit to very specific negotiations on highly enriched, the disposition of the highly enriched uranium that still is buried deep in a mountain somewhere. They have to agree on negotiating severe and long-term limitations and/or cancellation of enrichment activity in their country.
Murphy asked if the administration is willing to release sanctions to get to Phase 2. Rubio said any sanctions relief is conditional on Iran giving up its nuclear program, not just for reopening the strait. That has not been offered.
Iran is being sanctioned because they have highly enriched uranium. Iran is being sanctioned because of their nuclear activities. If they agree to give up those things, there will be sanctions relief associated with their commitment and compliance with those agreements.
You will not give sanctions relief just in exchange for reopening the strait.
No, that's not been discussed. That's not been offered.
Then Murphy asked the question that Rubio would not answer. You were one of a handful of top aides with a seat at the table when the president decided to launch the Iran war. Did you advise the president against it? Rubio said he will never tell anyone what he advised the president privately. He supports the decision. He believes it was the right decision. Murphy pressed. Were you for or against the war? Did the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor have no opinion? Rubio said he cannot tell him. No one in his role ever has. Murphy said, you do now.
No, I just told you I support the president's decision. I think he made the right decision. What I cannot tell you and will never do, and you have to understand, nobody in my role's ever done, is to go to you and say, oh, I was in a meeting and I told the president this, or I just can't do that. I won't do that. It's unwise to do that and it's unfair. But I am telling you the president made the right decision. That's my view. I believe in it strongly.
You do now, okay.
Then Murphy turned to the budget. $1.5 trillion for war. Not a cent for childcare. Not a cent to make health care more affordable. The budget slashes diplomacy while sending war spending through the roof. Global health programs cut by 40%. Funding to the World Health Organization halted. Nearly $2 billion in global health funding appropriated with bipartisan support is being withheld. Less than 2% of available Ebola funding is moving.
I know that Ebola funding somehow miraculously started moving when we were seeing bad headlines, but what is moving right now, Mr. Secretary, is less than 2% of what is available.
Babies born to HIV-positive moms in Zambia used to be tested within hours of birth. Now they are not tested until 6 weeks old. 5 million fewer people reached by PEPFAR than the year before. Murphy's conclusion was simple. This budget doesn't make America great again. It makes the world sicker and less safe. A budget is a statement of values, and these values are in big question. Let's watch.
My best. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being with us today. Despite the differences that existed between Republicans and Democrats prior to this administration on how to approach Iran's nuclear program, the theory was basically the same, that we were going to impose significant harm on the Iranian economy in order to force them to the table to negotiate. What is happening now is fundamentally different. This war and the administration's decision to blockade has now held the entire world economy and the U.S. economy hostage to the ability to negotiate an agreement with Iran. This is why the entire country is seized by the question of when there will be an agreement, because apparently until there is an agreement, the Strait of Hormuz remains closed. There is a cost to the Iranian economy, but now there is a devastating cost to the U.S. economy. It has been indecipherable, the information coming from the administration, especially in the past several weeks, as we get signals that a deal is imminent. The president said yesterday he's bored by the negotiations. He doesn't care whether we get a deal. I think it's really important for us to understand what your bottom lines are, what you're asking for in this negotiation, what commitments you need Iran to make in order for you to release the blockade, and we hope for them to release the blockade as well. So give us a little insight into what your bottom lines are. What is going to get the strait reopened? Because this is kind of the only question that matters for American consumers right now. And every day we get wildly different signals from the president as to whether he even is engaged in this question as to whether the strait is going to reopen.
Yeah, I think your question gets right to the heart of the matter. So I think it's a good question. Let me first bifurcate two things. The only reason there's a blockade, the only reason why there's a U.S. blockade is because Iran has closed they're firing on commercial ships. And they've mined large segments of Hormuz, international waters. And so the blockade is only against Iranian ships. And it's very simple. The notion is if no one's ships are going to get out, then Iran's ships aren't going to get out either. We can't live in a world in which they get to close the straits and tell everybody, pay us a toll or we'll blow you up, but their ships get to go out unfettered. So that's the reason why there's a blockade. There wouldn't have been a blockade if Iran had agreed to do what they said they would do when the ceasefire kicked in, which is they were going to open the straits. So let me just focus on the straits for a moment. Number one, what they're doing is unlawful and illegal. There isn't a country on earth, other than Iran, and maybe Oman that flirted with it, who's in favor of what Iran is doing in the straits. The Chinese are against it. The Russians are against it. Everyone is against it. The whole world is against it. So condition number one is they have to reopen the straits. And reopening the straits means the following. Ships can sail through international waters the way they can do through other choke points around the world without being fired upon, without paying a toll. That's condition number one.
But the strait is closed because of our decision to invade Iran. This is a consequence of our military action. So I guess I'm not interested in litigating that question. We all know why the strait is closed, because you took military action against Iran, and we knew ahead of time that that would be their likely response. The question is, how are we going to get it reopened? Are you going to drive a bargain that is so tough and so hard that the strait remains closed? So how are we going to get it open?
The first thing, that is a predicate to anything else happening. The straits have to be reopened. So the way to think about it is this. If Iran wants to be able to move its oil again through the strait, they will have to reopen the straits. If they refuse to do so, then we have other options available to us, but we would prefer to negotiate the opening of this, which means
tell us about the negotiations. What do you need from them in order to get the strait reopened? We need the strait reopened tomorrow.
Well, what needs to happen is very simple. They need to announce that they will no longer fire on commercial ships that are going through, or threaten to fire on ships, because in many cases, ships just won't move. They won't go, not because they got fired on, but because of the risk of being fired upon. And so they have to announce very clearly, the straits are now open. We're not charging a toll. We will help remove the mines that they put in there, and they will not fire on ships.
But the president says they also need to make commitments on their nuclear program. That's what I'm asking.
I see what you're saying.
What commitments do they need to make in order for the strait to be reopened?
Well, the second thing they have to agree to as part of this is, in addition to the straits, that's the predicate that opens the door to phase two. Phase two is they have to commit to very specific negotiations on the disposition of the highly enriched uranium that still is buried deep in a mountain somewhere. They have to agree on negotiating severe and long-term limitations and or cancellation of enrichment activity in their country.
In the second phase of negotiations.
Well, obviously, these are highly technical matters, so I don't think you could work those out in 5 days. That would require a team of experts to meet over a 30, 60, 90-day period and work out the details. But they have to commit to their willingness to do that. For example, they have to commit to say, we will dispose of the enriched uranium, and the question now is, what are the mechanisms by which we do so? That can be negotiated.
Final question. In order to get to that second phase, are you willing to release sanctions or release frozen money that the United States is withholding from Iran?
Right now, everything that's been discussed with them is that any sanctions relief. Now, remember, sanctions come. There's international sanctions, there's congressional sanctions, there's executive sanctions. So some we can release and some we cannot. But any sanctions relief is condition-based, which means it has to be in return for the reason why those sanctions were put in place in the first place, which is their nuclear program. So yeah, look, Iran is being sanctioned because they enrich uranium. Iran is being sanctioned because they've highly enriched uranium. Iran is being sanctioned because of their nuclear activities. If they agree to give up those things, there will be sanctions relief associated with their commitment and compliance with those agreements.
You will not give sanctions relief just in exchange for reopening the Strait?
No, that's not been discussed. That's not been offered.
Mr. Secretary, you are not only the Secretary of State, you're also the President's National Security Advisor. Those are both full-time jobs when we're at peace, let alone as we have troops deployed in multiple conflicts around the world, and the President is threatening to invade Cuba. So I want to just ask you specifically about Iran. You were one of just a handful of top aides with a seat at the table when the President ultimately did decide to launch the Iran war. Did you advise the President against the war?
I'll never tell anybody what I advised the President privately, but I will tell you that the President had before him all the information that he needed. I agree with the decision that he made, if that's what you're asking, because the President of the United States saw a threat of Iran developing a nuclear weapon behind a conventional shield that in about a year would have been impenetrable. And we could not allow them to develop that immunity, and then they could break out to a weapon.
So you won't tell us, this is a question that millions of Americans are asking, how on earth did we get here? So I wanted to know what you did advise the President. Were you for or against this war? Or did you, the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, have no opinion?
No, I just told you I support the President's decision. I think he made the right decision. What I cannot tell you and will never do, and you have to understand, nobody in my role's ever done, is to go to you and say, oh, I was in a meeting and I told the President this, or I just can't do that. I won't do that. It's unwise to do that, and it's unfair. But I am telling you the President made the right decision. That's my view. I believe in it strongly.
You do now. Okay. Let me just...
I've always have. I mean, in terms of my view of the challenge that it poses.
Okay. Well, back in March, you said this war would end in, quote, weeks, not months. And here we are, 4 months. Hundreds of troops injured or killed, and billions of dollars later. Trump promised everybody he was going to lower prices and no new wars. Now we have higher prices, new war. Trump promised the American people this war would be fast and decisive. It has been slow and secret and endless, and the majority of Americans do oppose this conflict. What my constituents are telling me is they want child care, they want health care to be more affordable. They don't want Trump to have $1.5 trillion more for a defense budget to start wars around the globe. I hear that constantly from so many people. You know, Secretary Rubio, let me just say this. Diplomacy and development tools help keep us safe here at home by mitigating conflict, by mitigating disease, other global threats. But the budget that you are here to defend, which would slash this work to the bone, while sending war spending through the roof, makes clear that diplomacy is Trump's last priority. And by the way, it's not just the budget or the unhinged rants attacking allies like Greenland and Canada, or threatening to end civilizations, or Trump treating war like a game, the White House posting literal video game edits as if he weren't getting American soldiers injured. It's also the actions that you've taken over the past year to gut the State Department, deeply concerning, dismantle foreign aid, abdicate American leadership. Under your leadership, it is deeply concerning that things like the state left 500 tons of food to rot in ports, and it had to be incinerated, or pushing out thousands upon thousands of dedicated public servants, including families who put country first here and left their home to serve around the world, only to be sacked with no rhyme, no reason. I've heard from them. Meanwhile, you are planning to put Trump's face on U.S. passports as if that's going to help our image when all that's happening. And the hack and slash job that you have done to foreign assistance and you're asking for in this budget has not only shattered America's global leadership, it has led to millions of preventable deaths. Programs have been frozen, grants have been canceled, life-saving work utterly turned upside down. I want to talk about global health. The stakes of life and death are here under global health. PEPFAR supported testing reaching nearly 5 million fewer people than the year before. In Zambia, babies born to HIV-positive moms used to be tested within hours of birth, and treatment started immediately for positive cases. Now, babies are not being even tested until they're 6 weeks old. So you're not just cutting resources that I just referenced, you are actually cutting the United States out of the conversation on global health threats and leaving all of us less prepared. We're in the middle of a deadly Ebola epidemic. We're seeing a worrisome hantavirus outbreak. This administration has halted funding to the World Health Organization. And you are currently withholding nearly $2 billion in FY25 global health funding that was appropriated with bipartisan support here, signed into law by President Trump, and expires in less than 4 months. Now, I know that Ebola funding somehow miraculously started moving when we were seeing bad headlines, but what is moving right now, Mr. Secretary, is less than 2% of what is available. So my point is that the delay in mobilizing those resources has cost us valuable time and let this disease kill more people. And the fact is we already had these support systems in place. They were in place until this administration destroyed them. And even as we stare down a crisis caused by this administration's incompetence, in my opinion, you are here today to defend a budget that doubles down on that. That is what is really disturbing to me, with a 40% cut to global health programs in this budget. So to my point of view, this budget doesn't make America great again. It makes the world sicker and less safe. And that, I'm just talking about the cuts that you're proposing with this budget, because we can't ignore the biggest line item in the president's overall budget that's in front of us, which is war. $1.5 trillion for war. Not a cent for childcare, not a cent to make health care more affordable. That's the budget that you are here today to defend, and it spends $1.5 trillion on war and slashes your department to ribbons. So that is what is concerning to me as you come before our committee today to back this request up. It just seems to me we are cutting diplomacy and paying defense contractors, and I just believe from my point of view, and I know you disagree with me, but I just think this is the wrong way for our country to go. A budget is a statement of values. I've said it many, many times, and I think it is in big question where the values are in this budget. So that's where I am.
This hearing is a masterclass in how to expose the contradictions at the heart of a foreign policy that has no coherent endgame. Senator Chris Murphy came with a simple question: how did we get here? And he kept asking it until Rubio could not answer. Murphy began with the war. The Strait of Hormuz was open before the war. It is now closed. The administration's blockade has held the entire world economy hostage. Gas prices are through the roof. Families are struggling. The president says he is bored by the negotiations. He does not care whether a deal is made. Murphy asked Rubio to explain the bottom lines. Rubio said the first condition is that Iran must reopen the straits. Ships must be able to sail without being fired upon, without paying a toll. The second condition is that Iran must commit to negotiations on the disposition of highly enriched uranium and severe limitations on enrichment activity. Murphy asked the obvious question: is the administration willing to release sanctions to get to phase 2? Rubio said any sanctions relief is conditional on Iran giving up its nuclear program, not just for reopening the strait. That has not been offered. The strait is closed because the administration decided to go to war. The administration is now negotiating to get it open. But the negotiating position appears to be that Iran must give up its nuclear program before any sanctions are lifted. That is not a negotiation. That is a demand. And while the administration waits, the strait stays closed. Gas prices stay high. Families keep struggling. Then Murphy asked the question that Rubio would not answer. Did you advise the president against the war? Rubio said he will never tell anyone what he advised the president privately. He supports the decision. He believes it was the right decision. Murphy pressed, were you for or against the war? Did the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor have no opinion? Rubio said he cannot tell him. No one in his role ever has. Murphy said, you do now. That is the heart of the exchange. Rubio will not say whether he advised for or against the war. He will not say whether he warned the president about the consequences. He will not say whether he told the president that the strait would close, that gas prices would spike, that the war would not be over in weeks. He will not say anything. He hides behind executive privilege. He hides behind tradition. He hides behind the president. Murphy did not let him off the hook. He noted that the war was supposed to end in weeks. It has been 4 months. Hundreds of troops have been injured or killed. Billions of dollars have been spent. Trump promised no new wars and lower prices. Now there is a new war and higher prices. Then Murphy turned to the budget. $1.5 trillion for war. Not a cent for childcare. Not a cent to make health care more affordable. The budget slashes diplomacy while sending war spending through the roof. Global health programs cut by 40%. Funding to the World Health Organization halted. Nearly $2 billion in global health funding appropriated with bipartisan support is being withheld. Less than 2% of available Ebola funding is moving. Babies born to HIV-positive moms in Zambia used to be tested within hours of birth. Now, they are not tested until 6 weeks old. 5 million fewer people reached by PEPFAR than the year before. Murphy's conclusion was devastating. This budget doesn't make America great again. It makes the world sicker and less safe. A budget is a statement of values, and these values are in big question. The administration says it wants to save lives. It cuts global health funding. It says it wants to end wars. It starts a new one. It says it wants to lower prices. Gas prices are through the roof. The contradictions are not accidental. They are the result of a foreign policy that has no coherent strategy, a budget that has no coherent priorities, and a president who treats war like a game. Rubio's performance was defensive. He did not answer Murphy's question about whether he advised against the war. He did not defend the budget's cuts to global health. He did not explain why the war is still going on. He said the president made the right decision. He said he believes it strongly. He did not say why. Murphy did not get the answers he wanted, but he did something important. He put the questions on the record. He showed that the Secretary of State will not say whether he advised against a war that has cost billions of dollars and American lives. He showed that the administration is withholding nearly $2 billion in global health funding while babies die of preventable diseases. He showed that the budget prioritizes war over childcare, over health care, over diplomacy. That is not a successful hearing, but it is a necessary one. Because sometimes the only thing you can do is show that the administration has no good answers. Murphy showed it.